I'd like to welcome everybody to the first lecture we've had this year. And I'm going to start off with an introduction of Project JFK CSI Dallas called Just the Facts. This is the city, Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas, the 9th largest in the nation, 386 square miles. Most people come to visit Dallas for its views, sporting events, and culture. This is part of it, Dealey Plaza. Dealey Plaza sits on 15 acres. The President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, came to visit for political reasons in November of 1963. What happened on that fateful day, on November the 22nd of '63, changed and shaped the country and the world even today. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Casey Quinlan, author, researcher, and teacher. He was born and raised in the greater Kansas City area. He's been a high school American history and government teacher for the past 40 years. He served in the U.S. Army with the 9th Infantry as a combat medical corpsman during the Vietnam War. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Social Studies and a Master in American History from Emporia State University in Kansas. He's the director of Project JFK CSI Dallas. He's been a featured lecturer at many universities, the A&E Network, the History Channel for Oliver Stone's blockbuster movie JFK. Casey has been researching the JFK assassination for more than 50 years and has read more than 1,260 books and publications about this national tragedy. Mr. Quinlan received the JFK Lancer 2011 and 2012 New Frontier Award for continued efforts to write and inform students of the truth behind the murder of JFK. I'd like to introduce Brian Edwards, an author, researcher, and teacher. He's been researching the JFK assassination for over 40 years. He has read over 400 books on the topic, has interviewed most of the Dealey Plaza eyewitnesses, Dallas Police Department officers, Dallas Sheriff's deputies, Secret Service agents, part of a medical staff that was in Trauma Room 1, and also the Navy corpsman that was at Bethesda who were there during the autopsy. He holds a master's degree in criminal justice from Washburn University, and from 1994 to 2001 served as an adjunct instructor at the Criminal Justice Department. From 1978 to 2001, Mr. Edwards served as a police officer with the Lawrence, Kansas Police Department. He was a patrolman, instructor, field training officer, a member of Special Investigations Unit, crime scene search team, and was the department's lead crime scene photographer. From 1983 to 1990, he was a member of the counter assault team, and in 1990, transferred to the counter sniper team, where he served until his retirement in 2001. In 2015, he was presented with the New Frontier Award from JFK Lancer. He is currently working on a new book entitled Lancers Down, a tactical analysis of the Elm Street ambush. In 2008, Casey and Brian co-authored the book Beyond the Fence Line, the eyewitness account of Ed Hoffman and the murder of President Kennedy. And my name is David Knight. I'm a researcher, lecturer, and videographer. I've been researching the Kennedy assassination since 1989. I've been involved with Project JFK CSI Dallas since 1991. I've read over 400 books on the topic. I've returned to the scene of the crime in Dealey Plaza over 20 times. I've reviewed and analyzed almost every film released on the topic. I've interviewed hundreds of key people and eyewitnesses involved with and around the JFK research community, including fellow researchers. I've been the videographer and producer of the JFK Lancer November in Dallas National Conference in Dallas since 2009. I've released in total of 11 documentary films, 9 with Project JFK and 2 with the author and researcher William Matson Law. I'm in the process of writing my own book on the murder of President Kennedy. The films that I've produced, which we have available today, are on our website at projectjfk.com, is the Truth Series, In the Eye of History, The Gathering Director's Cut with the autopsy corpsman that was at Bethesda, and also last year's 4 presentations, Grave Injustice, Guardians of the Republic, From Love Field to Love Field, and the Ed Hoffman Story, Films, Frames, and Fabrications, and A New Theory, New Weapon. The presentations today will not change the names of the innocent or the guilty. Dragnet, it's a noun, a systematic search for someone or something, especially criminals or criminal activity. This is one of the key aspects to researching this topic known as the Kennedy assassination. Just the facts, ma'am. If we saw 3 billboards outside of Dallas, Texas, this is probably what they would look like. JFK was assassinated. We still don't have the truth. Question to our government, how come? Today's presentations is going to be by Brian, Casey, and myself, on the right side of history, new revelations in the JFK assassination and the forces behind his death. Thank you. So we're all going back to class. Why it still matters. The Kennedy assassination. Our day will start off with a brief history lesson and we'll kick off our presentations that follow. We call this lesson JFK 101. The Kennedy family. Let us begin with the most famous Irish family in our history, the Kennedys. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born in 1917 to the family of Joseph Sr. and Rose Kennedy. They had 9 children altogether, and out of this they would become our version of the royal family here in the United States. And also out of this family, the nation and they themselves would experience tragedy that at times was almost too much to bear. The Kennedy brothers, the 4 brothers, Joe Jr., John, Robert, and Ted. Joe was killed in action in the Navy. JFK would become a congressman, a senator, and the president who was assassinated. Robert F. Kennedy would become Attorney General. Later, he ran for the presidency and was assassinated while campaigning. Ted would become a senator. John F. Kennedy enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserves in 1941 and retired in 1945. He retired as a full lieutenant. He served in the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence in South Carolina. Then he transferred to the Pacific Theater, commanding PT boats. Most famously, the PT-109. In the early hours of August 2nd, 1943, the 109 was struck by the Japanese ship, the Amagari, and it was cut in half, causing the sinking of the 109. Kennedy and his surviving crew swam for the close-by islands to await rescue. For Kennedy's actions, he would later become a decorated hero. Congressman Kennedy. After returning home from the war, JFK ran for Congress of the 11th District of Massachusetts. He served as a congressman from 1947 until 1953. Jacqueline Bouvier. In 1951, Jacqueline Bouvier, an inquiring camera girl working for the Washington Times-Herald newspaper, met Congressman Kennedy. And on September 12, 1953, JFK and Jackie married. Newly married John Kennedy ran for the U.S. Senate and won the office, serving from 1953 till 1960. He then ran for the highest office in the land. A new leadership for the 1960s. Kennedy ran for president with Lyndon Johnson as his vice president. On the night of November the 8th, 1960, JFK would be announced as our new president. The final totals the next day would show the rest of the votes counted and would be called the closest margin of a presidential election win. The slim margin was approximately 100,000 votes between Kennedy and Nixon. On the morning of January 20th, 1961, John Fitzgerald Kennedy took the oath of office, becoming our 35th president. So Jack, Jackie, and Caroline moved into the White House, with Jackie being pregnant with JFK Jr. on the way. President Kennedy took the oath and went to work chiseling out the new frontier. He would only serve the nation as its commander-in-chief for 1,036 days. He would not survive his first term as president. The 1960s were turbulent times with segregation. Kennedy worked with Martin Luther King Jr. to establish the first steps to end segregation, but it wouldn't be until after his death that his hopes and determination for civil rights would come to fruition. JFK, RFK, and MLK fought for civil rights and paid the ultimate price. The quest for civil rights had plenty of opposition from the likes of Joseph Miltier, General Edwin Walker, H.L. Hunt, the Citizens Council, the KKK, just to name a few. Race riots broke out and several paid the price with their lives. Organized crime. With Bobby Kennedy by his brother's side, the Kennedys took on organized crime, targeting Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters, organized crime bosses like Carlos Marcello, Santo Trafficante Jr., and Sam Giancana. The mob was not happy about the brothers' quest to see them in jail. Foreign policy. During the early 1960s, the U.S. military presence in Vietnam escalated as corruption and internal divisions threatened the government of South Vietnamese President Diem. President Kennedy approved sending 400 Special Force troops and 100 other U.S. military advisors to South Vietnam. On the same day, he orders the start of clandestine warfare against North Vietnam to be conducted by South Vietnamese agents under the direction and training of the CIA and U.S. Special Forces troops. American foreign policy after World War II was based on the goal of containing communism and the assumptions of the so-called domino theory. If one country fell to communism, the surrounding countries would fall like dominoes. On June 4, 1961, the president met with Khrushchev in Vienna. Kennedy did succeed in conveying the bottom line to Khrushchev on the most sensitive issues before them, a proposed treaty between Moscow and East Berlin. He made it clear that any such treaty which interfered with U.S. access rights in West Berlin would be regarded as an act of war. In the weeks immediately after the Vienna summit, more than 20,000 people fled from East Berlin to the western sector in reaction to statements from the USSR. Kennedy began intensive meetings on the Berlin issue where Dean Acheson took the lead in recommending a military buildup alongside NATO allies. In July 1961 speech, Kennedy announced his decision to add $3.25 billion to the defense budget, along with over 200,000 additional troops, stating that an attack on West Berlin would be taken as an attack on the U.S. The following month, the Soviet Union in East Berlin began blocking any further passage from East Berliners into West Berlin and erected barbed wire fences across the city, which quickly upgraded to the Berlin Wall. Kennedy's initial reaction was to ignore this, as long as free access from West to East Berlin continued. The course was altered when it was learned that West Berliners had lost confidence in the defense of their position by the United States. Kennedy sent Vice President Johnson, along with a host of military personnel, in convoy through West Germany, including Soviet armed checkpoints, to demonstrate the continued commitment of the U.S. to West Berlin. The prior Eisenhower administration had created a plan to overthrow Fidel Castro's regime in Cuba. The plan, led by the CIA, was helped from the U.S. military, was for an invasion of Cuba by a counter-revolutionary insurgency composed of U.S.-trained anti-Castro Cuban exiles led by CIA paramilitary officers. The intention was to invade Cuba and instigate an uprising among the Cuban people in hopes of removing Castro from power. Kennedy approved the final invasion plan on April 4, 1961. The Bay of Pigs invasion began on April 17, 1961. 1,500 U.S.-trained Cubans, called Brigade 2506, landed on the island. No U.S. air support was provided. Allen Dulles, director of the CIA, later stated that they thought the president would authorize any action required for success once the troops were on the ground. This did not happen. By April 19, 1961, the Cuban government had captured or killed the invading exiles, and Kennedy was forced to negotiate for the release of the 1,189 survivors. After 20 months, Cuba released the captured exiles in exchange for $53 million worth of food and medicine. The incident made Castro weary of the U.S. and led him to believe that another invasion would occur. On October 14, 1962, CIA U-2 spy planes took photographs of the intermediate-range ballistic missile sites being built in Cuba by the Soviets. The photos were shown to Kennedy on October 16th. A consensus was released that the missiles were offensive in nature and thus posed an immediate nuclear threat. Kennedy faced a dilemma. If the U.S. attacked the sites, it may lead to nuclear war with the USSR. But if the U.S. did nothing, it would be faced with the increased threat from close-range nuclear weapons. The U.S. would also appear to the world as less committed to the defense of the hemisphere. This could also be no assurance that the assault would be 100% effective. In accordance with a majority vote of the NSC, Kennedy decided on a naval quarantine. On October 22nd, he dispatched a message to Khrushchev and announced the decision on TV. The U.S. Navy would stop and inspect all Soviet ships arriving off Cuba, beginning October the 24th. The president exchanged 2 sets of letters with Khrushchev to no avail. One Soviet flagged ship was stopped and boarded. On October 28th, Khrushchev agreed to dismantle the missile sites, subject to UN inspections. The U.S. publicly promised never to invade Cuba and privately agreed to remove its Jupiter missiles from Italy and Turkey, which were by then obsolete and had been supplanted by submarines equipped with UGM-27 Polaris missiles. This crisis brought the world closer to nuclear war than at any time before or since. In the end, the humanity of the 2 men prevailed. Kennedy believed the CIA lied to him, and CIA Director Allen Dulles was fired. JFK stated, "I will splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind." Other key moments in office: JFK established the Peace Corps. He began a strong push for the Civil Rights Movement. He started the space policy to go to the moon, and many more great and not so great things. JFK talks of peace.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women, not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
The Warren Commission. President Johnson, on November the 29th, 1963, through Executive Order 11130, commissioned orders to establish a committee to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy. This committee would later become known as the Warren Commission, getting its unofficial name from its chairman, Chief Justice Earl Warren. The investigation took them less than a year to come up with their findings. The commission consisted of Earl Warren, Gerald Ford, Richard Bissell, John Cooper, John J. McCloy, Hale Boggs, Alan Dulles, Assistant Counsel Arlen Specter, and David Bellin. The Warren Report was released in November of 1964. A one-volume book was released first. The 26 volumes followed after that. Their findings? Oswald did it alone. One rifle, 3 shots. All 3 shots came from the 6th floor corner window of the Texas School Book Depository building. Here we see a view of the sniper's perch on the 6th floor of the TSBD. Warren Commission Exhibit number 510 with circles around the 3 rifle shells that were found in the sniper's nest after the assassination. 1, 2, and 3. Warren Commission Exhibit 399, what we've become known as the magic bullet. And here we see Arlen Specter demonstrating the magic bullet theory. The single bullet theory. One shot caused all the wounds between Kennedy and Conway. The findings of the second official investigation, the House Select Committee on Assassinations. The United States House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations, known as the HSCA, was established in 1976 to investigate the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. The HSCA completed its investigation in 1978 and issued its final report the following year, concluding that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. So we have 2 official findings. So 2 findings by 2 different committees. So now what do we believe? That's the question. Conspiracy? There have been numerous theories over the years since the assassination. They have ranged from the CIA, FBI, the military-industrial complex, the mob, organized crime, even all the way to the office of President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Who had the most to gain? Why? Could it have been because JFK wanted to pull out of Vietnam? Was it Cubans because of the Bay of Pigs invasion? Was the mafia involved? Did our own government give the orders? Or what else could it have been? So here's the challenge. It's been 55 years since JFK's murder. We still don't have the whole story. Documents are still being released and researched. People are still researching this topic. We owe it to JFK and to the future generations to keep asking questions, keep researching, and to keep seeking the truth.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
When he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he shall make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun.
Our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal.
John F. Kennedy gave his life on November the 22nd, 1963. We owe it not only to him, but but to the world, to our generations, to our kids, our grandkids, to search for the truth and find out what really happened on November the 22nd, 1963. Thank you.